Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce and Kelsey McEwen. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
This week, we're talking new music and a new album with country superstar Keith Urban. Did you know that the Nashville Predators are set to honor him with his own bobblehead?
Also coming up on the podcast today, we'll share our chat with Habiba Noshin about her new documentary, Bodies for Rent. This takes a look into Canada's controversial clinical trial industry.
But first, fashion and style trailblazer Jeanne Beker is opening the doors to her closet and using what's inside to tell the story of her life.
Thanks for joining us, and don't forget, you can watch us live, CTV Your Morning, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, and on your CTV News app.
For decades, Jeanne Beker has been pioneering fashion content and making the industry really accessible to everybody. And now she's walking us through a wardrobe of memories and meaning in her new book, Heart on My Sleeve. Here's Anne-Marie's conversation with her now.
This feels like my old home, no question. When we first moved into this building, 1987, I was here from 1987 to 2014.
Yeah. Well, with the new music first, and then you went on to fashion television.
Exactly.
But you're here now for your book. It is called My Heart on My Sleeve, great title. And I love this concept of how you've chosen to tell stories. You're taking elements of your fashion and telling what they mean with a broader context.
I think that our wardrobes are great memory keepers. And I really look at all these garments, pieces of jewelry perhaps, some of them accessories, as almost like signposts of the past. Like they really take you back to a certain time. Now, I am such a pack rat. I have held on to a lot of these things that I became so sentimentally attached to. And I know a lot of people can relate to that because a lot of people do get sentimentally attached to things in their wardrobe. And the fact that I could now, use them as a way into telling some of these stories, these adventures, these incredible encounters that I had with people, I think it really makes sense. Clothes really tell us so much about who we are, not only to others, but to ourselves.
Listen, people who wanted to treat fashion as trivia need to remember that even people who are running for the highest positions in the land think about what they're going to wear before they go out and make an address.
Totally. My dad, my late great dad, always used to say the first thing that people judge you by, what you're wearing, for better or worse. Listen, I know it's all superficial, and at the end of the day, that is not what gives people great style. It's not what we wear, it's how we wear it and how we move through the world. However, first impression, maybe.
We talked about you keeping things. Now, this is something that you don't still have, but you start the book with this satchel. And can I point out that these illustrations were done by your daughter throughout the book?
My daughter, Becky O'Neill, very talented animator, illustrator, and she did all the illustrations. This was a satchel that my parents had brought over with them from the old country when they immigrated here from Austria after the war, after the Holocaust. They're Holocaust survivors. And they had precious little with them when they landed at Pier 21 in Halifax in 1948. But they did have this old satchel that was stuffed with photographs that people had given them post-war, because they both lost their entire families in the Holocaust. But they did meet some people that had, for some reason, had these old pictures of their family members, and they collected them all and they kept them in this satchel. And as a little kid, I remember that was the first accessory that I was fascinated by, this satchel that lived at the back of my mom's closet. And I would open it up and I would see that, wow, I did have grandparents once upon a time. Maybe I never got to meet them, but I did have cousins and aunts and uncles. Maybe I wasn't so different. I was more like other kids. So it just told such a great story about my roots, and I knew I had to start the book that way. Not the most fashionable accessory by a long shot, but it really sets me up. It explains to people, who I am and where I've come from.
It's amazing that this article that we would call an accessory now has really become this historical record of your family. We have so much to talk about in so little time. Can I jump to this conversation with Beyonce? You have interviewed so many celebrities, both for music and for fashion. But you did this sit down with Beyonce in 2006, and she brought one of her favorite photographs. Matthew Rawlinson, he took the photo, which is still hanging in your den.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us what stood out to you about that day.
Oh, well, Beyonce's star was just beginning to rise at that point. So it was in the early 2000s, and I was editing a magazine called FQ, a big glossy fashion quarterly. And Beyonce agreed to be on the cover, and it was fabulous. She was so incredibly grounded, professional, kind, caring, and I knew that this woman was really on the path to become a major megastar, which of course she is. I was so impressed with her. Yeah, that's the best thing about my life. So many of my heroes never let me down. Most of them. I don't think I can think of one person that I've interviewed from the world of music, the world of fashion, certainly, and just all the entertainment reporting I've done over the years that really let me down. They were all incredible. I honestly tell you, except for maybe Iggy Pop. Yeah. He was never my hero to begin with. Anyway, that's another story in the book.
Jeanne, there's so many great stories. I would encourage everybody to pick this up. It's not only about milestones in your life, but really a part of Canada as we grew up and we watched you and we read you all those years ago. A real honor to have you here. The book is called Heart on My Sleeve. And on behalf of every girl in rural Canada that shopped at Mariposa because of what you showed us on the runways from Paris, thank you so much, Jeanne.
Thanks so much, love. A pleasure.
I'm not kidding about Mariposa. I think I even had to drive to Calgary, like 2 hours away.
No way.
Because I would watch stuff on her show and then be like, oh, black and white polka dots are in, and then I need to get all the stuff.
What I really loved about that show too is like just the speed of the edit. It was like ding, 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 ding. Like it was just so intoxicating the way that it was put together, and you really did feel transported.
Well, the fact that it was filmed here. Like that, that's what I take a second and I pause when we're sitting in this building where Jeanne Beker used to walk down the halls. There's a hallway upstairs in our building where it has the fashion television logo. And I walk past it every single day. And it's never lost on me that like icons have walked through this building.
Yeah, and like remember, Jeanne Beker didn't start in fashion. She started as a VJ, well, as a host really for the new music. She was one of the originals, the OGs. And she talks about in this book how she was not a fashion reporter. She was an entertainment reporter who reported on fashion because she realized early on when nobody else was in this space that fashion and celebrity and music, it was all combined. It was all the same thing. So when you watch that old footage, she is elbows out in this refined, sophisticated Paris runways because she needed to get the clips. And she was like little Jeanne Becker from Queen and John in Toronto fighting against the big names in Paris and Milan.
So awesome. And to your point, Kels, like watching people who have worked in this building at some point, because so many people who have come back here, watching their faces, they walk down the stairs into the studio and they just kind of look around because it's almost like a sensory experience. George Strombo, too, he was in recently as well. And just you can see them look around and then they start to recall the stories. Along with, a lot of the crew that we work with here, some of them have been here for, 25, 30 plus years. And the stories that they have, that they tell us in commercial breaks are pretty awesome.
Well, and the stories that Jeanne was telling about, like, there's this famous interview she does with Iggy Pop where he's a jerk and she swears at him and sort of tells him off. But the camera people who were working that interview have their own stories and the telling of that story, which is always so great to hear.
What was, I think, really interesting, too, about the week that Jeanne Beker was here, that same week, Canada Post unveils a brand new stamp all about this building.
Oh, that's right.
Like celebrating the history of much music, because 40 years ago, which I hate saying 1984, it was 40 years ago, but it's fine. That's a conversation for another day. But honoring the history of much music, because to your point, Linz, to your point, Anne-Marie, like we have so many people come in here who have their own stories to tell. Hanson was in recently. They sat down. So they came in and they sat down on the same couch that we're recording the podcast today, and they looked around this space, and the look on their face that this space has kind of grown up to. That it was the days of much music and Electric Circus, and there was all this dancing and partying that happened here, and now they're here on a morning show.
And they have kids.
And they have kids talking about this family experience that they've had. Like, it's just cool. It makes you stop for a second and go, we're part of Canadian history, even just being viewers of much music and viewers of Jeanne Becker and fashion television.
And back then, I mean, there were 3 channels, right? Maybe 4 if your antenna worked really well. And so this was...
Or if you had a younger sibling, me, who had to hold the antenna while your siblings were watching the TV.
Yes, that was also my job. But, that this was all there was to watch. I remember being 16 years old, and the first place I wanted to come was right outside of these windows. So it's pretty cool to actually work in this building now. Anyway, it was a great conversation and a really good trip down memory lane with Jeanne. What an icon.
Next up, Keith Urban on collaborations, the state of country music, and the vulnerability he poured into his brand new album. Teddy Wilson was co-hosting on the show that week, and he had a chance to sit down with the country superstar.
All right, music fans, Keith Urban's brand new album, High, has him opening up like never before. This highly anticipated record is his first since 2020 because he actually wrote, recorded, and scrapped an entire record called 615 that was set to come out in 2023. I had the chance to sit down with him to find out why he did that, and we also chatted about his love of New Music Fridays, what makes a great collaborator, and a surprising and super cool accolade he's set to receive in January. Here's our conversation. Welcome back to Canada. How's it going so far?
Good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And congrats on the new album. I know it's the first one since 2020. There's so much to talk about with it. The title of the album, High, is about the euphoria that different things in our life can bring to us, and how for you, music is that euphoria. So I'm curious, you know, it's been over 30 years. I think it was 91 that the first self-titled record came out. So all these years later, how do you maintain that sense of euphoria that music gives you?
Because I'm curious and passionate and curious and interested about new ways to express music. Collaborations come in with that because different ideas, fresh take, a fresh approach, a different way of doing something. It's eternal. And I listen to New Music Friday every week, and I listen through what's going on. Oh, this is interesting, this is good, this is good, this is good. I don't just like it because it's new. I like it because it speaks to me.
When you now listen to this album, front to back, High, and you hear it, what is it about these songs and this collection of songs that you're really proud of, whereas maybe those other songs that you put aside, you felt something was missing?
They just had a strong pull towards a whole album. I know it's a weird thing to say, but there was 4 songs on this previous album, which was called 615, which is Nashville's area code. And there was 4 songs on there that I really, really loved, but all the rest didn't feel like they belonged with those 4. And so it was almost like those 4 said to me, take us with you. We don't live here. We live in another place. And if you just take us and know that we go on this record, you'll know what goes around us. And it was, I know it's weird to say it, but it's literally like the music then guided me from there, all the way through the whole album.
As messed up as me and you, and we used to paint this town, burn it down, and go round for round for round.
It seems like you have a bit of an open door policy in terms of collaborators. Like you collaborate with so many different people across lots of genres. Everybody from Taylor Swift, Dolly Parton, Snoop Dogg. On this record, you're working with Lainey Wilson as well. And it's a really great track. So for you, whether you're songwriting with somebody or performing with them, what makes a good collaborator?
Spirit.
Spirit?
I think a collaborative spirit is key, That's the great thing about a collab is that there's what you do, there's what I do, and then there's this third thing, which is what we will do. We have no clue what that is until we sit together and this third thing happens. And you and I might both go, wow. Wow, I couldn't have done it without you. And like, well, of course not. That's the whole point.
If we collaborated, you would not say that, but I appreciate that.
You might be surprised.
It's never too late. It's never too late to break the chain.
If you'd indulge me on the last track on the album, Break the Chain. You know, listening to it, I found a very moving experience. It seems to be about, you know, the notion of kind of breaking the chain or the cycle of negative patterns, toxic behavior. You've spoke openly about your father's struggles, your late father in the past. So I want to ask you, you know, when a listener hears that, I think there's an element of therapy, and certainly music has been very therapeutic as a fan in my life.
Me too.
As a songwriter, when you're writing a track like that, is there a therapeutic element?
It's a great question, and I think in the case of Break the Chain, that was more a surprising revelation to me that I was still working through things that I didn't realize I was still working through. The song came to say to me, it's like a dream, you know, you have a dream, and you wake up at 3 a.m. and you're sort of like, you're wide awake, freaking out about certain things that you go, I thought I had dealt with that. I thought I'd processed that, and now it's coming back at 3 a.m. while I'm lying in bed staring at the ceiling, feeling worthless and that life is terrifying. What happened? Why am I still processing this? I thought I was at peace with my dad and everything's great, and this song comes on and goes, not quite. Not quite. There's some more things to work through.
So I'm curious as to your take on country music in 2024 and where it's at as a genre right now.
It's a short question.
Yeah, super short.
Tell us about the meaning of life, Keith.
Yeah.
When I moved to America and I played country music, I was well aware of all the things that fit within the genre of country. It's massive. I mean, country is a massive genre. It always has been.
Yes.
From Western swing and Bakersfield sound and just everything, you know, bluegrass and where that fits in, and gospel and everything. Countrypolitan. There's so many. The country rock, southern. You know, it's a massive melting pot. And I think what's happening now is we're finally getting to see how big and broad it is, because there's so many ways in which artists can find their audience making their version of it.
You've had so many honors and accolades in your career, you know, like over 20 #1 hits, multiple Grammys, more CMAs than I could count. But I want to ask you about a recent announcement of an honor, and as a Canadian, I was especially impressed by it. The Nashville Predators of the NHL have announced a Keith Urban bobblehead is coming out. That is huge.
That's it. Forget the Grammy schmammy.
There you go.
I get a bobblehead.
How does it feel to know that you're going to have an NHL bobblehead? Apparently it's going to be in an upcoming game.
I'll let you know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet.
Well, I looked up the schedule, and I think when the Predators play, when your Keith Urban bobblehead is going to be given to some lucky fans, I believe they're playing Minnesota that night. Because if they were playing the Leafs, it would be a bit conflicting.
How do you know all of this? This is amazing. I don't know this.
Oh, well, you have a Keith Urban bobblehead.
That
for the
I
Nashville
know. I just didn't
Predators.
know about the Minnesota game happening at the night. Wow.
Well, because I
What's the score? We know everything else.
Well, I just wanted to make sure they weren't playing the Leafs, because then I'd feel conflicted about cheering for your team that night.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, you're good.
Well, congratulations on the new album. It's fantastic. And I just love what you put on the canvas. Man.
Thank you.
Thank you for the music.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
it too.
Great chatting with you.
So glad you are enjoying Your Morning, the podcast. Every week, we bring you some really interesting conversations from our show on a wide variety of topics and some behind-the-scenes chats. Of course, you can always join us live weekdays, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app.
The devastation from Hurricane Milton forced millions of people from their homes, but what about people experiencing homelessness?
More than 30,000 unhoused individuals live in Florida, a state that was already suffering from a lack of shelter beds.
Lindsey, you spoke with Jeffrey Noose, executive director of the Daily Bread, and you guys talked about the acute risks that extreme weather events pose to those experiencing homelessness.
So I'm outside of our outreach center here in Brevard County in Melbourne, and it's still pretty gusty here. We've got the tail end of the winds, and lots of down branches and things like that. And getting ready to open up our outreach center to help people get what they need to kind of survive another day on the street. It might be a shower, might be a meal, and then we go from there.
You've been speaking with people. What has their experience been like over the last 48 hours?
So it was frightening, especially in the run up to the hurricane. A lot of uncertainty in the midst of that vulnerability of being on the street. Fortunately, we were able to help a lot of our neighbors in need get into storm shelter. So the storm shelters are there for people that are evacuating their homes, but our community has made sure to allow people that don't have a home to also take shelter there, these most vulnerable.
I would think that communicating with people to let them know the hurricane was coming in the first place, that presents some challenges, I would think. How do you get the message out?
Yeah, that's right. So our outreach teams were spreading the word. We made announcements and updates. But even the day before the hurricane, I spent a lot of time, our team spent a lot of time really explaining the situation and encouraging people who may be a little reluctant to go into the storm shelter.
Jeffrey, how many shelter spaces are typically available for people who are unhoused in the state of Florida?
So typically in our community, which is Brevard County, a county of a little over 500,000 people, we have just a handful of shelter spaces. So this is a critical need in our community. We don't have what you might call low barrier shelter, where somebody can just show up and stay for the night. And so storm shelters are even more essential.
Earlier this month, I understand the state of Florida banned encampments and sleeping on public property. So how did that impact communities as preparations were underway for Milton?
So it sows a lot of distrust and concern that people are unwanted or somehow a danger. And so people experiencing homelessness are feeling that stigma. It has not helped to build the relationships that are necessary to overcome a homeless situation.
So how long do we expect these emergency shelters to be open for?
So they were open on a very limited basis for one night, only during the most intense aspect of the storm. So we helped everybody get onto the buses. Our public transportation system brought people to the shelters and then returned them here yesterday. So they're already closed.
So where's everyone going?
That is the important and challenging and even devastating question.
I think about the fact that you're taking care of people's physical needs, but I have to think about the emotional needs of all of these people. Is there a way that that's addressed right now?
Yep. So we have a licensed mental health counselor team that seeks to address those concerns. It's a challenge every day. So the hurricane does exacerbate the moment of crisis, but really when you're homeless, you're in a constant crisis.
Next up, the world of human drug trials and why cash-strapped Canadians are volunteering to be professional guinea pigs.
In this shocking new documentary, Bodies for Rent, Habiba Nasheen explores the lives of two men who make a living submitting themselves to trials.
This documentary, I tell you guys, I watched it. It is difficult to watch. It is devastating, and your heart is broken at the end of it. It is a must-see piece of journalism.
Kelsey, you spoke with three-time Emmy Award winner on her latest project. Let's listen to that.
We all take medications. Yeah. We've all taken drugs. You look at the package, you see some side effects listed on there. And I don't know that I've ever stopped to think, how do they know that? Yeah. There's a whole industry behind this. We know that these human drug trials happen. Many of these trials are accompanied by unpleasant side effects, long-term health risks. What is it about these trials that draws people in, like the two people in your documentary, to participate?
I mean, the pharmaceutical industry would like you to believe that people do this because they want to help promote science. They do this from the goodness of their heart because they want to bring life-saving drugs to the market. But when you actually talk to people, it's a paycheck for them. They're really honest about it. They need this money. They're renting out their bodies for drug testing because for many of them, including people living in Canada, it's hard to make ends meet, and their body is something that they can sell.
Well, and just to be clear, they're not making a ton of money doing this. They are scraping together, trying to make ends meet, trying to just pay their rent and make a living. There's a line in the documentary where it says, this is really focusing on our poor population, on people who are really vulnerable as it is, and they are the ones who are participating.
Yeah, I mean, the people we featured in our documentary, they have a hard time keeping down a minimum wage job, basically, because they say, we can get a minimum wage job, but we're not getting enough hours to cobble up 40 hours a week, so I need to sell my body in order to pay my rent, get food on the table.
So take us through a typical trial. What are the conditions like that these people are participating within?
Yeah, so what most people don't know is that our drug testing is done in phases. And the first phase, before a drug can go on the market and be tried on people, or not, before the drug can be tried on people who actually have the disease that the drug is trying to cure, we actually test it on people who don't have the disease. We test it on healthy people, and we pay people to do that. So that's where this industry has sort of propped up, where we're paying healthy people to test the medication to see if it's safe or not. And because we're paying people, it ends up being people who have very little means saying, yeah, sure, I'll take the money, put the drug in me, and I'll tell you what the side effects are. So that's the focus of the documentary, is that population that first test the drug that has never been tested in human most of the time, and they're the ones that are going first to say, yeah, put it in me, and I'll tell you what happens.
And it's not like they're staying in like swanky hotels while they're doing this. What are the conditions like?
So most of them live inside the facility for at least portions of the time. That's pretty typical. In one case, one of the participants we followed, he's inside a facility for 2 months. You walk in, and you don't go out for 2 months. There are scenarios where they may take you for a little walk in the parking lot for 15 minutes a day. But for most of the time, outside the bathroom and the bedrooms, there are cameras everywhere. Often if it's like a diet restricted trial, they're giving you the food. You must eat all the food that's on your plate. You have 30 minutes to eat it. They're very strict regulation. And, one of the participants in the film called it drug jail. And I think that's an, adequate description of what that's like. You're often staying in a large room with bunk beds with, say, 10 to 12 other people. Very limited privacy.
When we look at kind of outside of the industry, what kind of regulation is there that's keeping an eye on what's happening here and protecting the people who are participating in these?
That was really eye-opening. We just assumed that in the US, it's FDA, and in Canada, it's Health Canada watching over this and seeing what's happening. But what we learned was, over the years, more and more these drug trials have moved out of university settings and more into the private sectors, because for the pharma company, the universities just weren't fast enough. We wanted drugs. There was a demand for drugs. The universities don't move fast. So in the last 20 years, we've seen an increase of more and more drug testing happening in the private sector, but our oversight system is still a holdover for when it was happening in universities. So it's not being monitored as well as it should be.
You followed these two people in the documentary for a year, but you worked on this for a couple of years now. I'm sure that you've seen the physical and the emotional toll that these trials take on a person. In that time, have you come across any safer alternatives to what they do now?
I think one of the things that, in talking to people, one of the things that I'm finding that I was really shocked by, people often are afraid to disclose the side effects that they have when they're in the drug trial. Because if they disclose the side effects, they get kicked out, and which means they don't get the money that they were promised. So you can imagine a poor person, you're giving them drug and you're saying, let us know if it gives you a side effect. But if you tell us that it's going to give you a side effect, we're going to kick you out and you're not going to get the money that you're actually here for. They're telling us we're not disclosing the side effects. So the better system, I think, would be if we don't tie payment to reporting side effects, because the people are telling us we're not going to report the side effects if it affects our livelihood.
More than 17% of breast cancer deaths are in people aged 40 to 49. But the province of Ontario is hoping to bring that number down. They are looking for signs of the disease sooner.
So now women as young as 40 years old can make self-referred mammogram appointments in the province. And that means more than 300,000 additional women can access screening for the disease.
Anne-Marie, you spoke with general practitioner oncologist Dr. Anna Wilkinson on what impact this will have.
Doctor, this is good news for women's health. How much of an impact could it have on people with breast cancer and their prognosis?
I think this is really great news, and I'm excited to see that we are getting rid of barriers in terms of access to care and increasing women's autonomy. I think we're going to see more early stage cancers that have a better survival as a result of this change.
Lowered age, as you just said, could mean an increase as well, though, in demand for appointments. And you've said that this could affect existing wait times for mammograms in Ontario. What do patients need to know this morning about how to make an appointment and what they can expect in terms of wait times?
So I think there's a lot of variability around the province, but I think we have been preparing for this. And so I think we have capacity in terms of screening mammography at the moment. I think really women need to decide for themselves if this is something they want to do. If they do want to go ahead and book a mammogram, they can book themselves. They can look at Ontario Health breast screen locations to find a site near them. If they want to discuss with someone and figure out if this is right for them, they can call 811 or they can talk to their provider. And there's an online site called My Cancer IQ where people can look up and learn more about their risk.
They can also check out cancercareontario.ca as well for other breast screening locations. Doctor, we've been doing this show for 9 years now, and I feel like these age limits have changed more than once. And when they were altered to an older age bracket, so 50 and up, the argument was because of false positives. So what changed that led to this new lowered limit?
I think we've had a lot of Canadian research that's come in the last couple of years that really shows what's going on in Canada for women in their 40s. And what we know from our Canadian data is there's an increase in the rate or incidence of breast cancer in women in their 40s by about 10%. We know that women who have access to screening have significantly lower rates of advanced breast cancer diagnosis and significantly higher survival. We also know that women in their 40s have more aggressive breast cancers and so can benefit more from screening. We've seen that screening saves our system money. And most recently, we're looking and seeing that there are differences in terms of age of diagnosis with respect to your race and ethnicity. And white women tend to have a much later age of diagnosis, whereas women of all other race and ethnic groups have a much earlier age at diagnosis.
How do these policies on self-referral vary from province to province? We're talking about this change today in Ontario, but it's not the case for women in other provinces.
That's true. I mean, I think really most provinces now are moving towards or have screening in their 40s. Alberta is different in that it starts at 45. Manitoba and Saskatchewan are working on phasing in screening, and the only provinces that really don't have anything at the moment are Newfoundland, that's said that they are going to be implementing something, and Quebec, who's still, it's yet to be known what their position will be.
What steps would you like to see governments take to increase early detection of breast cancer?
I think we need more publicity and more awareness around the fact that women in their 40s and 50s and beyond can self-refer. We need to be looking at trying to bring screening to people, because we know that there's lots of populations that are not accessing screening at the same rates as people typically with higher socioeconomic status. I think we need to be looking at women in their 70s, their later 70s. Is there benefit there? And we need to be looking at breast density and what we should be doing there.
This is a great step, but always more to learn. Dr. Wilkinson with the Ottawa Hospital Cancer Centre. Thank you. Linz, yesterday you had a great conversation with brothers Jay and Trey Richards about their new series, The Office Movers. It's very funny. Here in your morning. And the show, they reminded us, is definitely rooted in the family.
We definitely grew up working for our dad's office moving company against our will for many years. And it was no joke. That's exactly what my dad said. Movies no joke.
Movies no joke. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about that. Your brothers in real life. So your dad had a moving company. What was it like to sort of revisit those moments?
It's funny now. At the time, it was traumatic, scary. Our dad wasn't our dad. We weren't allowed to call our dad at work. We had to call him by his first Richie.
Richie is his name.
And how old were you at the time when you were working?
My first job was at 10 years old.
No way.
I was 10 years old. There's a lot of concerned clients. Is this kid too young? My dad's like, no.
He's fine.
Oh, it's so funny.
10 years old, he's fine. So that was a clip of Jay and Trey sharing their experiences of working with Dad, who they called Richie at the company. I love that they couldn't call him by his first name. So the show, by the way, as a reminder, premieres today on Crave. And
it's so funny.
And I turned to Lindsay afterwards yesterday and I was like, did you ever work for your parents? Because I worked for my parents.
I did.
Tell me about working
I did. I worked for my dad.
Yeah.
So my dad is not a lawyer, okay? He's not a lawyer, but his office was in a law office. And for like for decades. So there were like 3 other lawyers in the office. It was like the proper lawyer name, and Bill Deluce was in there too. And so I essentially worked I worked at the desk. This is when I realized I'm not good with like an office job, like a 9 to 5. But he was total makeshift. Like he's like, let's keep her busy. I rearranged the filing cabinet many times. I used to call like the different cell providers, not cell phone providers at the time, to find the best deal. We had to do that every month just to make sure that I was
Saving
on top
money.
of it. Yeah, but it was great. I mean, we would have lunch together like that. It was one summer, and it was great because he was like, what is this child going to do with her life? Let me employ her so that she at least has some money coming in, even if I'm the one who has to pay for it.
Were you good at your job?
Of course. Right, Dad? I'm not the one to ask.
And could you call him Dad, or did you have to call him Bruce?
I didn't call him anything.
Oh, okay.
I called him nothing.
Okay.
I called him nothing. But, subsequently, we have worked together with these real estate projects, and I definitely refer to him, especially when we're on calls, as Bill.
Yeah.
As Bill. What about you?
Oh, okay. So I worked for both my parents at various stages. My mom was in real estate. So anybody who's out there who's a realtor's kid understands that there's a lot of free labor involved. And back in the day, when everything was mail-outs and handouts, I cannot tell you the amount of, like, envelope stuffing. And then going door to door and dropping stuff off with like...
How great, that's great training ground for what you do now.
I know how to write a killer business letter, answer the phone, book appointments.
Talk
I did
to
all
anybody.
that. So there was a lot of free labor. That was the free part of the job. And then when I actually went to work in the office, then I called her Muriel.
Yeah.
Directly.
How old would you have been? Would you like teenager?
Oh, I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Like, I think I started at 15. And sometimes she'd forget to pay me, and I'd have to go to the...
Oh, my God.
Call
the labor
HR. No, I would have to go to the comptroller and be like, here are my hours or whatever. And Mom would say, like, that's
you're an office employee. Go talk to the.
So I have a question for both of you. So do you feel like that was the best way to have kind of a first job with a parent, the learning ground? Like what asset did it give you?
Oh, it was good office experience. It was good learning how to deal with clients because I wasn't directly working with Mom. She was off selling houses. I was in the office answering phone, booking appointments, and dealing with other realtors.
So if you could now, if you had a job where you could employ one of your children, would you do that?
Which child would I employ? That's the real question.
I keep asking. I have things I need doing. Like I have administration stuff I need doing. And I'm offering to pay them. It's not like in my house where I did it for free. They are not interested.
I had Brooklyn do something last night for me.
Did you really?
I did.
Did you pay her?
For our Airbnb property in Meaford, I was like, can you put together like a slide deck of the things to do and maybe stuff that's happening at this time of year so that maybe I can port it over to the Instagram. So she's been doing that.
Did you pay her?
No, not yet. I gotta see the results. Thanks for being with us today.
For more great conversations, download or hit subscribe to Your Morning, the podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And we'd love for you to watch us live weekday mornings on CTV CTV News Channel or on your CTV News app. Start your morning with us.